My name is Jaylani. I live with my husband, Theodore. Together, we run a set meal restaurant. This restaurant, named Sunflower, is a place that my grandfather had lovingly maintained for years. It has many regulars from the local area and has been loved for a long time. However, my grandfather, who had always been energetic as the owner, was also battling cancer. I can't just sit around in a hospital room. I'll work at Sunflower until the end. Even as his condition worsened, my grandfather never complained. He kept serving delicious food with a smile on his face, chatting with regular customers. Today, surrounded by his family, he breathed his last breath. My grandfather named me, his granddaughter, his successor for the restaurant. Maybe he had realized his time was near. He left a detailed will, including instructions about the inheritance of the shop. Accepting my grandfather's will, I decided to become the owner of Sunflower. Thankfully, even after my grandfather passed away, the customers didn't stop coming. The employees who had been working for us continued to serve faithfully. Having watched my grandfather's cooking all my life, I was confident that I could continue to serve dishes that tasted just like before. Perhaps it was because I was cooking with all my heart to keep the restaurant going, but the regular customers, who were used to my grandfather's cooking, gave positive feedback. "This taste! It's just like your granddad's. It feels like he's still here even though he's gone." The regulars were delighted that they could continue to enjoy my grandfather's flavors. Sunflower has been thriving just like when my grandfather was around, and I'm more motivated than ever. However, since my grandfather passed away, my husband has started to show dissatisfaction.
Normally, a man would be the owner of a restaurant. I don't get why you inherited it.
I'm his granddaughter. That's why. The restaurant is in my name, but we're running it together, so it doesn't really matter, does it?
Well, I guess.
My husband seemed to have wanted to be the owner and sometimes vented his frustrations, but I'm the one who mainly cooks. Since my grandfather's time, my husband has mainly been handling the cash register, deliveries, and shopping. An owner who can't cook doesn't quite fit the bill. I could have given in a little and not been so stubborn, but my grandfather had nominated me. Once nominated, I didn't want to disregard my grandfather's wishes. "Jaylani, can I have another one of these?" "Sure, got it." The restaurant is still bustling, and I'm busy every day. Then, one day, someone paid a visit. "Hey, big bro, long time no see." It was my husband's younger brother. This brother-in-law of mine was quite a troublesome character. Despite his age, he didn't hold a steady job and was always flitting about, playing around. To be honest, I found him difficult to handle. Last year, he moved far away, saying he was going to find work, but it seems he quit that job and came back.
Oh, welcome back.
Despite this, my husband cherished his younger brother. My husband seemed glad that his brother had returned to our hometown.
I heard the old man passed away. You took over the shop, right, bro?
No, not me.
No way. Your wife? Seriously? A woman running a shop? That's hilarious.
Unaware of the annoyed looks from the customers, my brother-in-law roared with laughter. I felt silly engaging with my brother-in-law and decided to ignore him.
Since we're family, it's free, right? Yeah, sure.
My brother-in-law ate a large meal, drank beer, and left without paying. That's how unreasonable he is. "Our relatives come here too, but they always pay. It's unfair to make only your brother free, so please charge him next time."
It's fine. He doesn't have money. It's okay to give him a break.
My husband seemed to be siding with his brother to the end. After that, my brother-in-law regularly visited the restaurant and ate and drank without paying. Each time, I warned my husband, but he would not listen. Perhaps because I was being persistent, my husband became grumpy and talked less. As our relationship worsened, my brother-in-law started coming to the restaurant more frequently. And each time he would whisper with my husband in the back of the kitchen. I'm sure they were bad-mouthing me. I tried not to mind their behavior and kept cooking. While glancing at me working hard, my brother-in-law had this conversation with my husband.
Can't we somehow make this restaurant yours, bro?
The name is in my wife's name, so...
The location is good. There are many customers. Let's make it your restaurant and monopolize the profit. It must be hard being under your wife's thumb like this.
Well, yeah, but... My brother-in-law had set his sights on Sunflower and was scheming to make it their own. Taking advantage of our marital strife, he was trying to get my frustrated husband on board.
But how are we going to make it our restaurant? I have a good idea.
The two began to quietly plot. My husband agreed with his brother's opinion, and they decided to put their plan into action. The next day was the restaurant's day off. My husband left early, leaving me alone. Even though it was my day off, I remembered that the kitchen was dirty. I decided to visit the restaurant and spend the whole day cleaning. When I tried to open the door of the shop, it was unlocked. Thinking I'd forgotten to lock it yesterday, I rushed in, and there were my husband and brother-in-law.
Oh, you're here.
I was surprised because the door was unlocked. It's our day off today. What are you doing? As I called out, the two of them smirked as if they were up to something.
Actually, we have something to talk to you about. Since you took over this restaurant, you've been getting too big for your boots and it's bothering us.
I'm not getting big-headed.
No, you are. Don't you think so? I do. You're happy because the restaurant's thriving and profitable.
What are you trying to say? The two of them spoke as if they were making fun of me, which frustrated me. As I showed my angry expression, my husband started to spread out some documents on the table.
I'm sick of your attitude. Let's get a divorce.
The document was a filled-out divorce application. Surprised by the sudden announcement, I was stunned. Huh? What? What do you mean? I was shaken, unable to understand what my husband was thinking. The first thing that crossed my mind was about the continuation of the restaurant. There are a few employees, but running the restaurant alone after the divorce would surely be hard. This is too sudden. I don't understand what you're saying. It would be hard for me to keep running the restaurant alone if we divorce.
About that, we're going to buy this restaurant. We're going to start it anew as our own, so we want you to leave.
I couldn't understand what my husband was saying at all.
It's such a waste to continue running a dull diner in such a good location with so many customers. We're gonna make this restaurant better. That's why? Please sign the divorce papers and leave quickly.
The two of them were saying such absurd things that I couldn't keep up. This is a restaurant that my grandfather protected. The profits are already enough. We should continue as we have been for the sake of the customers.
So you're saying you have no intention to grow? In a little while, a restaurant like this will go out of business. To prevent that, I'm saying I'll start a new restaurant.
No matter what I said, I couldn't get through to them. Surely my husband must have been brainwashed by his brother.
Well then, we'll buy this restaurant for whatever price you want. We'll be able to earn it back quickly, so any price is fine.
I couldn't stand the bullying attitudes of the two of them. All right. If that's the case, I'll sell it for $50,000. Please wait for 2 weeks while I prepare the divorce papers and the contract. And during those 2 weeks, neither of you should come to the shop. Once I said I was selling the shop, the two of them were in high spirits. There was a reason I was giving up the shop so easily. They were selfishly talking without knowing about it. In the meantime, I managed to run the shop alone. Huh? Where's your husband? Well, we're actually getting a divorce. What? So suddenly? So, will you be running Sunflower alone then? No, my husband is buying the shop. I'll be leaving in 2 weeks. The customers were surprised and looked genuinely disappointed. But there's some good news too. I quickly distributed flyers that I had made to the customers. When they saw it, their expressions immediately relaxed. And 2 weeks later, I presented the contract to sell the shop and the divorce papers. There are no complaints with this, right? My husband promptly signed the contract.
$50,000. I'll transfer it to your account right now. So this is my shop from now on.
My husband and brother-in-law were ecstatic. With them out of the corner of my eye, I packed up my belongings and left the shop. On my way to file the divorce papers, I was excited to see what the two of them were going to do next. My ex-husband and brother-in-law immediately started running the shop.
We've explained the situation to the employees, and even without Jaylani, the shop should run fine. All right, let's make some money.
With that, the two of them began to prepare for the day with enthusiasm. At 10 o'clock, when the shop usually opens, a different scene unfolded.
Why aren't the customers coming?
There were no customers who usually came as soon as the shop opened. The employees who had always been diligent about coming to work weren't at the shop either. My ex-husband tried calling the employees, but no one was answering. They had never experienced anything like this before, and the two of them began to panic. Rushing out of the shop, my ex-husband noticed a regular customer walking by.
Hey, you're our customer, right?
Huh? Oh, yeah.
I've been worried because you haven't come in yet. Come on in.
Didn't you say the wife quit the shop? I was coming here for her cooking, so maybe I won't come anymore.
Don't say that. We'll definitely serve something delicious.
My ex-husband somewhat forcefully guided the customer into the shop. The customer reluctantly entered the shop and started to look at the menu to place an order. What's with this menu?
Since I'm the shop owner now, I've decided to drastically change the menu.
The traditional sunflower set meals were nowhere to be found on the menu. The menu was filled with foreign words, and it seemed difficult for the customer to understand, causing a drop in enthusiasm even before ordering. Then I'll have this steak.
Understood.
My ex-husband and brother-in-law enthusiastically started cooking. The customer, who had never seen my ex-husband cook, anxiously awaited the meal. Hey, is it ready yet?
Sorry for the wait.
Finally, 40 minutes after the order was placed, the meal was ready. When the steak was brought to the table, the customer's eyes widened in surprise. What is this? What my ex-husband served could hardly be called a meal. There were only 3 pieces of meat in the center of the plate. The outside was burnt, and the inside was raw. There was no sauce or anything else, just a bowl of bread and soup.
We used high-quality ingredients, so we only used salt and pepper for seasoning. We cooked it to bring out the aroma of the outside and enjoy the rare inside. The customer didn't touch the steak, which looked like a failed dish at first glance. Upon closer inspection, the soup appeared to be instant. I'm sorry, but I can't eat this. The disgruntled customer stood up, ready to leave the shop. My ex-husband was shocked that not a single bite was taken. Customer, you still have to pay. That will be $30.
$30? You're joking! I can't pay for this garbage-like meal? The furious customer stormed out of the shop. Taken aback by the unexpected turn of events, my ex-husband and his brother were stunned. At the same time, they realized they were in a dire situation. Neither my ex-husband, who had barely ever cooked, nor my freeloader brother-in-law could possibly run a restaurant. They should have realized this if they thought about it, but they were too focused on making money. From that point on, not a single customer visited the Sunflower under their management. Meanwhile, I had started a new shop in a different location. It's Sunflower 2. The employees who had worked at the original Sunflower are also with me. This shop was also inherited from my grandfather. My grandfather had been concerned about the aging sunflower and its durability, so he had built a new shop in a different location. He wanted to announce the new shop once it was finished, but he passed away before the shop was completed. This shop was entrusted to me. I had not disclosed the existence of this new shop to my ex-husband. During the 2 weeks I handed over Sunflower, I advertised the new shop. Regular customers who wanted to eat my food all followed me. Thanks to that, the shop has been bustling since its opening day. We have enough margin to hire a few part-time workers. Since I have the $50,000 I received from my ex-husband, I can also add to the employees' salaries. Here, I began to offer my original dishes. To broaden our customer base, I came up with menus for younger people and even weaning food that small children could eat. This has attracted a lot of attention, and the number of families visiting has increased. While keeping my grandfather's flavors, I'm growing the shop to fit the times. The daily hustle gives me a sense of fulfillment. Meanwhile, my ex-husband and his brother were at a loss in the old Sunflower. They had borrowed a large amount of money to pay me $50,000, and now they are receiving demand letters.
What are we gonna do about this? You're the one who suggested this, right? Figure it out!
The brother-in-law, whose predictions had gone awry, was holding his head in his hands. Then he had an idea.
I've got a great plan.
Hatching a scheme, the two of them suddenly showed up at my bustling restaurant during the busy lunch hour.
Jaylani, please help us!
Despite the restaurant being packed with customers, the brother-in-law was shouting loudly.
My brother hurt his arm and can't cook anymore. We'll give the old restaurant back. Could you return the money as well?
You guys took over the old restaurant, remember? You signed the contract. You need to take responsibility and make it work. I brushed off the brother-in-law's plea and was about to return to my work when my ex-husband appeared from behind him, looking pained.
Jaylani, help me.
Thinking he was being overly dramatic, I was about to turn back to the kitchen when the restaurant became noisy.
Whoa, what's that?
That looks painful. Is he okay?
When I looked towards my ex-husband, seeing the customers stirring, I was taken aback. His fist was covered in a large bruise. Are you really injured?
That's what I've been saying.
Then go to the hospital right now. I quickly called a taxi and sent my ex-husband to the hospital. During my lunch break, I went to the hospital to check on him. When I arrived, he was just coming out, apparently finished with his examination. As I tried to ask what had happened, the two of them avoided my gaze and hurriedly ran off. Feeling suspicious about their behavior, I decided to inquire at the hospital reception. I believe a man named Theodore was seen here earlier. Has his examination finished? I came to pick him up.
Please wait a moment.
I had them check on the status of his examination using his name. However, the receptionist was looking puzzled. There's no record of such a consultation. Perhaps he went to a different hospital? My ex-husband hadn't received an examination. Remembering the sight of the two running away, I felt they were hiding something. I quickly set off to pursue them. A few minutes of driving later, I spotted my ex-husband and brother-in-law walking. I immediately stopped the car, grabbed my ex-husband's arm, and called out to him. I knew it! Looking at the fist of the arm I grabbed, the bruise was completely gone. My ex-husband and brother-in-law tried to run, but I mustered all my strength to stop them. Seeing my furious expression, they quickly calmed down. Why is the bruise gone? You weren't injured after all.
Well, running a restaurant's hard. The old Sunflower hardly gets any customers, so we can't make money and can't pay back the debt. That's why I pretended I was injured and couldn't continue the restaurant to try to get the money back.
I'm appalled. You were trying to deceive me with such a childish lie. I let go of the two. Don't involve me in your affairs from now on. You two figure out what to do with that restaurant. I got back in my car and returned to my restaurant. Through the mirror, I could see the two hanging their heads in shame, which made me feel pathetic. Afterwards, the two quickly put Sunflower up for sale. I think they made that decision to repay their debt, but due to the building's age, they struggled to find a buyer. They received a flood of debt collection letters and were working around the clock. This life suits them, having thrown away something precious due to their greed. As for me, my newly renovated restaurant is thriving even more than before, with sales doubling. One of my regular customers offered to apprentice with me, so now I have a disciple. I often remind him that running a restaurant is not as easy as my ex-husband thought. I want to continue to carry on my grandfather's restaurant for the foreseeable future.
There was a belief that a woman who couldn't have children after 3 years of marriage was useless. This idea is out of touch with modern society. It's a backward way of thinking. Sadly, there are still those who carry the assumption that all women can and will become pregnant and give birth. And there are those who label women who can't as useless. My name is Ashley. I'm a 25-year-old housewife. I am unable to conceive. I have been weak and sickly since childhood with little physical strength. I often missed school. I didn't play with friends much, so I was shy. I had pale skin, was very thin, and didn't talk much. My parents considered me a defective product and despised me. They wished I would die sooner because I was a burden. All their love went to my older sister, Emily, who was 1 year older than me. Emily was healthy, unlike me. She had beautiful rosy cheeks and big, lovely eyes. I also had big eyes, but my thinness made them look sickly. My wealthy parents focused all their attention on pampering Emily. They bought her anything she wanted. I was left behind on family trips due to my illness. Hired housekeepers and nurses mechanically took care of me. I wasn't considered part of the family, so I never received souvenirs. Being treated as defective by my family was hell. I had no friends to talk to and I was lonely. My parents wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible. When I became an adult, they quickly married me off. My parents gave a large sum of money to my husband, Kevin. It was compensation for taking care of a weak, infertile, and defective person like me. Kevin, who was in financial trouble, married me for the substantial financial support. I was a full-time housewife. I was unsure whether Kevin was working or just having fun. However, he always came home late and drunk. Our marriage was based on money from the start, so Kevin never had any affection for me. Be grateful that someone like you, who's useless, even got married. I was repeatedly told the same thing as my parents, that I was useless because I couldn't have children. I still couldn't get pregnant after several years of marriage. However, there was one thing that saved me after getting married. Although Kevin treated me coldly, my father-in-law and brother-in-law and his wife were kind to me. My father-in-law, who'd known me since I married his son at age 20, treated me like his own daughter. My brother-in-law Mike and his wife Maria cared about me, especially Maria, who was worried about me. Ashley, you don't need to be like a doll and do whatever people say. Mike works for a big company and Maria also has a job. She even runs her own interior design office. She's a cheerful and wonderful woman. Maria is also very caring. Knowing that I spent most of my days alone and lonely, she came to check on me. At first, we just had tea and chatted, but eventually she started teaching me various things. Try to get a qualification in something, even if it's just a hobby, she advised me. I told her it was impossible because I hadn't gone to school enough. Seeing that I was down, only able to do basic housework, Maria said, "If you can do basic housework, you can do most things. Learning something new builds confidence." At Maria's suggestion, I started studying for a color certification. I later learned that my father-in-law had consulted with Mike and Maria about me. Ashley tends to underestimate herself. "I wish there was a way to boost her confidence," my father-in-law said. "Introducing her to new areas of study could help," Maria suggested. Mike and my father-in-law agreed with her suggestion. Although my parents used to say that I was weak and slow-witted, I found studying enjoyable. I gained a bit of confidence when I passed a certification exam while studying during my free time. I was happy because I had always thought I couldn't do anything. I wanted to study more and aim for higher levels. However, when I told Kevin, he just scoffed at me. Must be nice to be able to waste time on useless studying. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt by his words. Instead, I felt angry. I finally let out the dark feelings I had kept inside. Are those the words something an unemployed person who relies on money from his wife's family should say? Kevin was taken aback by my sarcasm, as I had always been submissive. He got angry at being confronted with the truth. "Shut up. I'm different from a defective product like you. I'm going to make it big," he shouted. I didn't hold back in my response. "You know, they call people like you big mouths." Furious at my defiance, Kevin kicked the wall and stormed out of the room. He probably went out to drink and have fun to blow off some steam. I understood that my parents wanted to get rid of their troublesome daughter, but I wish they had chosen a better partner for me. However, if they had that kind of mentality, they wouldn't have neglected their weak daughter in the first place. Marrying Kevin was a mistake. I ended up married to a loser who used the money from my family to play around. But ironically, it was Kevin's family that broadened my narrow perspective. After that incident, Kevin didn't come home for several days. I knew he was with my sister Emily, but I didn't do anything about it. Emily had divorced her husband and given up custody of her child. My parents still doted on her. That's why they allowed Kevin and Emily's affair to continue. I could clearly see the intentions of my parents, Emily and Kevin. They were probably planning for Kevin to divorce me if Emily got pregnant. My parents would have preferred to fulfill Emily's wishes over caring about me. I knew that one day my sister would steal my husband. I prepared myself for that day, now confident that I could handle it. Sometime later, we all gathered at my father-in-law's house. I regularly visited him, but Kevin hadn't been to his family home in a while. Kevin had a lot of pride and compared himself to his brother. Mike had graduated from a prestigious university and worked for a large company while Kevin was unemployed. Neither my father-in-law nor Mike had ever pointed this out. But Kevin felt inferior on his own. He hadn't done anything about it himself. He took pride in marrying me, a woman from a wealthy family, but my father-in-law didn't care. My father-in-law doted on me, his daughter-in-law, but was strict with Kevin. Kevin constantly praised Maria, Mike's wife, for being excellent. Deep down, he was jealous that his brother had a beautiful and intelligent wife. Maria is amazing. She's successful at work, has children, and is a capable woman. Ashley is just stupid and can't do anything, he said with transparent flattery toward Maria and insults toward me. Maria looked annoyed by his words, but she calmly dismissed Kevin's remarks. Ashley is my sister too. I don't find it amusing when my sister is insulted, Marie replied. Mike nodded in agreement. Kevin, think about yourself before comparing Maria and Ashley, Mike warned. Kevin clicked his tongue dismissively. I felt embarrassed by Kevin's childish behavior. I understood that he felt inferior to his successful brother, but he needed to grow up. My father-in-law looked at Kevin with bitterness. He had treated them equally, but the siblings had turned out so differently. He had sighed about it to me. But today, my father-in-law cleared his throat and scolded Kevin. Aren't you ashamed, Kevin? Relying on Ashley's family money and not working? Ashley is a good wife. If you're a husband, support yourself. Don't you understand something so simple? Kevin's face turned red with anger. Dad, Ashley was useless and dumped on me. That's why I'm just returning the favor, he retorted. Mike answered on behalf of his father. Kevin, I don't want to say this as your brother, but your mind is rotten. Usually calm, Mike's sharp words made Kevin curse and storm out. As I tried to stop him, my father-in-law held me back. I'm sorry, Ashley. I hoped he would become more responsible after getting married, but it seems that's not the case. With their shoulders slumped, Mike and Maria sighed beside my father-in-law. As I quietly bowed my head and tried to leave, Maria stopped me. Don't worry, Ashley. Everything is prepared. I nodded and left my father-in-law's house, returning to the chaotic home where Kevin was raging. The room was a mess, destroyed by Kevin in a fit of anger. As I stared in disbelief at his childish actions, the drunk Kevin raised his voice. I'm divorcing you, the infertile one. I'm going to marry your sister. Kevin laughed, bragging that my parents had already given their consent. So Kevin chose Emily after all, I thought. My parents had always given Emily everything she wanted. Even if it was my husband, they didn't mind. Kevin knew I couldn't have children when he married me. It was convenient for him to use me as a wife. However, Emily wanted Kevin, and my parents condoned their affair. They probably wanted grandchildren now. So they would use Emily's pregnancy as an opportunity for her to marry Kevin. It was something my parents were capable of doing. When Emily divorced before, she gave up custody of her child, saying the child wasn't cute because they weren't attached to her. Emily was the type who loved herself more than her own child. I felt sorry for the child Emily and Kevin would have. Would a child born to such selfish parents be happy, I wondered. Kevin, not understanding my concerns, mocked me, telling me to leave because we were divorcing. "I'll pay you alimony, you good-for-nothing." The shameless man didn't even realize that my parents would be the ones providing alimony. I signed the divorce papers, took my essentials, and left the house. Instead of going to my parents' house, I sought refuge at Mike and Maria's. I had been consulting with them about my suspicions about Kevin and Emily's affair. Mike said with a gloomy face, "I wouldn't put it past Kevin." That's when Maria started preparing for the worst-case scenario. Mike and Maria had a young child. When I arrived at their house, their shy child peeked out for a moment before hiding again. He was a cute boy who resembled Maria. According to Mike, his son was extremely shy. Maria, Mike, and I discussed our plans for the future. Maria had already arranged a place for me to live. I would be staying in the company housing of Maria's interior design firm, and I was going to work at Maria's firm. I was anxious about whether I could work, having never worked before. However, Maria assured me with a smile, "Don't worry, Ashley, you can do it." Maria took care of me, and Mike handled the paperwork. I severed ties with my family after the divorce. Mike explained the situation to my former father-in-law and concluded, "Dad, we are cutting ties with Kevin too." My former father-in-law was disheartened but not surprised. He told me to come and visit as usual since Kevin was no longer related to us. That's how I officially divorced and became independent. I received alimony from Kevin and severance money from my parents. I returned the severance money without using a dime. I didn't want to use my parents' money ever again. I started working at Maria's interior design firm. At first, I learned the basics of the job from one of Maria's subordinates. His name was Stephen, a cheerful man around my age. He taught me in between his busy schedule and chatted with me casually. One morning, I was the first to arrive at the office and cleaned it, surprising Stephen. "Wow, the office is spotless." He happily helped me with the cleaning. When I apologized, he tilted his head, puzzled. "I've thought this before, but why do you apologize when you haven't done anything wrong? We're equals. We work together." This was the first time someone told me we were equals. I had always felt inferior because of my weak body and inability to get pregnant. I believed that I was burdening others by living. In reality, the capable Stephen should have been in a higher position. But he laughed it off and said that if we worked together, we were the same. I felt embarrassed by my own self-deprecation, realizing that there were such generous men out there. At that moment, Maria came to work a little early. She looked at Stephen and me, smiling. "Oh, Stephen, did you finally get close to Ashley?" Stephen turned bright red at Maria's words. I didn't understand what she meant until Maria whispered to me, "Stephen wanted to talk to you alone and was waiting for a chance." Stephen blushed and said, "Director, we agreed you wouldn't say that," before leaving for the break room. Maria playfully slapped my shoulder as I stood there, dumbfounded. When I finally understood the situation and blushed, Maria said, "Stephen is such a good guy. It seems like he's liked you since you first came into the office. But I'm divorced and I have a flaw." Maria exchanged glances with Stephen, who had prepared a cafe latte for her. Then she patted my bowed head and confessed a shocking truth. The son Maria and Mike were raising wasn't their biological child. In fact, he was a child of Maria's relative. They had taken him in after his parents died in an accident, so he was essentially adopted. Maria and Mike prioritized raising the child who had lost his parents. My former father-in-law knew about it, but Kevin didn't. That's why I didn't know until now. Maria said while looking at Stephen and me, sipping her cafe latte, with a warm and gentle voice, "When our first son called us Dad and Mom, I cried. Having a biological child doesn't automatically make you a good parent. Even with blood ties, there are parents and children like me who ignore each other. But Maria and Mike's son chose his parents of his own accord. I thought that was far more precious than a forced family based on blood ties alone." I took a sip of the cafe latte Stephen had prepared for me. The warm and sweet scent gently relaxed my heart. About 3 years have passed since then. I married Stephen. We got married about a year after we started dating. When I apologized again for being unable to have children, he got upset with me. "You don't need to apologize, Ashley. Would you be happy if I knelt down and apologized for not being able to have children?" I shook my head and he laughed cheerfully. "It's just a minor issue. Don't bow your head for something you don't need to apologize for." He had no idea how much his words saved me. Even after remarrying, I kept in touch with Maria, Mike, and my former father-in-law. All 3 were happy for my successful marriage. And today, we were on a short trip. It was a tourist spot that Maria had once told me was fun when she visited with her family. I was sitting in a chair, waiting for my husband. He said he needed to use the restroom, so I was resting at a nearby tea shop. Then suddenly, I heard a voice from behind. "Ashley?" It was Kevin, my ex-husband. Behind him was my sister, Emily. Emily was still beautiful, but her makeup had gotten heavier. "You're still so gloomy. Traveling alone after the divorce?" Since I hadn't told my parents about the remarriage, Emily thought I was single. As I ignored her, my husband returned. "Sorry, Ashley, the restroom was crowded." My husband looked puzzled at Kevin and Emily. He definitely wanted to ask, "Who are these people?" As I tried to ignore them and urged my husband to leave, Emily mocked me. "You found another man already? Even though you're incompetent and can't have kids." As Kevin tried to laugh along, my husband spoke up, looking displeased. "I am Ashley's husband, and her name is now Ashley Stevens. By the way, we do have a child." He patted my belly and Kevin turned pale. Emily sneered. "I bet the baby will be disabled." My husband replied in a cold voice. He was probably at the limit of his patience. "Ashley is currently pregnant with her second child. Her older daughter is 2 years old and healthy. Today, we left her with my parents." Kevin turned pale at my husband's words. I myself was shocked when I first got pregnant. I cried out to the doctor at the maternity clinic, told him I shouldn't be able to have children, but the doctor examined my body and declared I could get pregnant. I had been led to believe by my parents that I couldn't have children. I had taken their word for it since they had always said so. However, my body was actually able to conceive normally. When I told my husband about my pregnancy, he was overjoyed. During my marriage with Kevin, I never got pregnant. I wondered why, so I consulted with Maria. Then she sighed, shook her head, and formed a hypothesis. I never tested myself because of my parents' suggestions. Actually, my parents knew I could get pregnant. Kevin knew too and was using contraception. Maria hesitantly muttered to me, "Ashley, there's a possibility that your parents have been deceiving you all along. Probably they didn't want me to have children. They thought it would be a hassle if I, who was frail, gave birth to a child who had disabilities. So they instructed Kevin not to get me pregnant. I remarried and had a healthy baby girl with Stephen. My second child during pregnancy is a boy, and both mother and child are healthy. I had been burdened with an inexplicable sense of guilt due to my terrible parents' scheme. As my husband and I were about to leave, Emily pointed and smirked. I aborted Kevin's child. It was a failure. In other words, she aborted it due to the possibility of disabilities. Kevin desperately begged me, "Please give me one of your children. Otherwise, I'll be kicked out." Emily laughed maliciously. I was about to scream in anger, but my husband stopped me. He looked at Kevin and Emily with disgust and said, "Save your nonsense for when you're in a coffin, you piece of trash." He gave them a sharp glare, then urged me to leave while holding my hand. I also turned my back on Kevin and Emily, sending them a contemptuous look before walking away. I felt like I had seen something incredibly bad for their unborn child. Later, I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Caring for my 2-year-old daughter and infant son is difficult, but my husband helps me. As for my ex-husband, Kevin, he was eventually abandoned by Emily. My parents were also kicked out once they were no longer needed. According to my ex-father-in-law and Mike, Kevin is in debt and struggling financially. They turned him away when he came asking for help, dumbfounded by his situation. And my selfish parents and sister Emily also ruined themselves. After divorcing Kevin, Emily indulged in affairs with married men and ultimately met her downfall. She was sued multiple times by her lovers' wives and had to pay alimony. In the process, she gradually lost her fortune and credibility with those around her. Even my parents couldn't stop Emily. Finally, due to Emily's selfishness, they lost all of their assets. Moreover, foolish Emily borrowed money from a shady company and is now being chased by a huge debt. My parents and Emily are homeless, but it's not my concern. They are not my family. They are just blood-related strangers. My precious family consists of my kind husband and 2 beautiful children. It doesn't matter what happened to my parents, Emily and Kevin. As I changed my son's diaper, my husband played with my daughter, laughing. Seeing his smile, I truly felt grateful to have met him. I smiled while watching them, and my husband looked puzzled. "What's wrong, Ashley?" "I'm just so happy to be married to you, Stephen," he playfully replied while patting our daughter. "Well, you're Mrs. Stephen, too." His cheerful laughter made me and our children break into smiles as well.
Next customer, please come this way. The cash registers were getting crowded, so I quickly opened the one next to me and guided customers. After a while, the congestion was resolved, and I returned to stocking shelves. "Mary, you're amazing for being able to ring up customers so quickly." The person who spoke to me was another part-time employee. In this supermarket, there are high school students and many people of the same age group as me, so I enjoy working here. My name is Mary. I'm a 45-year-old part-time housewife. I've been working at this part-time supermarket for about 10 years. When my child entered elementary school, I decided to find a job and applied for a part-time position at a local supermarket that was recruiting. There were many housewives like me, and the manager is also a parent, so it's a good environment that understands child rearing. I've been working here for 10 years. Before I knew it, I became one of the oldest part-timers. There are more familiar faces among the customers, and many people greet me, and I get along well with other part-timers and part-time high school students. However, I never expected that something like this would happen. One day, we were told that our manager, who we all appreciated, was being transferred, and we were all disappointed. But the manager was transferred to the headquarters, which seemed like a promotion route. He was competent, so it was inevitable. Although it was a shame, we all congratulated him on his promotion and sent him off. The next manager was from the headquarters and did not know much about the field. No one mentioned it, but being a manager from the headquarters seemed like a demotion. He was nagging and incompetent. and the atmosphere in the store deteriorated. According to other part-timers, the president's wife seems to favor young, handsome managers. The manager probably thought that he could benefit from being liked by the president's wife. I often saw him talking to her. The new manager's reputation was bad, but the president's wife was the worst. She complained about every part-timer. However, she talked to male employees and high school boys working part-time with a sweet voice. Although we part-timers were dissatisfied, no one dared to complain to the president's wife. Eventually, some part-time housewives and student part-timers started quitting. Just as I started considering looking for another part-time job, I became the target of the president's wife. You've been working at the store for a long time, right? How about your child? Already a college student? Which college? I was surprised to be asked such a question suddenly. Yes, I've been working here since the previous manager. I didn't want to talk about my child, so I tried to dodge the question. Then the president's wife said this. You look incompetent. You probably didn't even go to a decent college, did you? That remark hit me in the heart. But just then, the register area got crowded, so I nodded to the president's wife and quickly got in line. Actually, I only graduated from middle school. I was bullied in high school. Tried my best to hang in there, but eventually couldn't go anymore and quit during the summer of my 3rd year. Since then, I'd been living as a part-timer, met my husband at a part-time job, got married, and lived in a world completely unrelated to educational background. But the president's wife seems to be the complete opposite of me. She brags about being a graduate of a prestigious university, even when nobody is listening. But for some reason, she stubbornly refuses to mention the name of the university. I thought it was strange, but since I wasn't particularly interested, I always let it slide. The president's wife probably had a preconception that housewives working part-time at a supermarket don't have high educational backgrounds. In fact, I once heard her talking about it with the store manager. Does she want to look down on us? Other part-timers also said they were asked about their education by the president's wife. The next day, as I was working as usual, the president's wife came to the store again for some reason. Excuse me. I looked up when the president's wife addressed me. She looked down on me and laughed, as if something was funny. Somehow, controlling my irritated emotions, the president's wife opened her mouth. You're a middle school graduate, aren't you? I didn't think you went to college, but I never thought you were just a middle school graduate. It's amazing that you can work with that kind of educational background. I wondered where she heard that from, and remembered that yesterday the store manager was checking part-timers' resumes in the office. I thought the manager should know about the employees, but I guess that information went to the president's wife. Knowing that I was a middle school graduate, the president's wife told other employees about it for some reason. Frankly, it was annoying. I had no intention of faking my education, but I couldn't understand the nerve of someone who would go around saying that I was a middle school graduate. My part-time colleagues didn't seem to care and acted as usual, but since then, the president's wife would always bring up that I was a middle school graduate. Maybe you wouldn't understand since you're a middle school graduate. Since you're a middle school graduate, at least do some cleaning. That was the president's wife's catchphrase. I don't have to work here to be told things like that. That's what I started to think. A few days later, the president's wife appeared at the store again. Just seeing her made me irritated. As I sighed and tried to walk past her, She was smirking at the cardboard box storage area. It was a place where we didn't go because the supplier would come to pick up the boxes. But for some reason, the president's wife seemed to be trying to make me clean it up on purpose. She said, "People like you should be covered in garbage. You bottom-dwelling middle school graduates are just salary thieves." This was the back room, away from the customer's eyes. I had always been able to bear it because I was usually approached in the sales area, but that day, I couldn't hold back my pent-up anger. "Excuse me, but I think I'm working for the salary I'm getting. I'm working properly, and education doesn't matter, right?" The president's wife looked a little surprised, perhaps not expecting to be talked back to. "Why don't you be a little helpful to the store if you're here? We never know what you're doing here. Are you just here to look down on us? You must have a lot of free time." I continued without caring about the other employees passing by and entering my field of vision. The president's wife glared at me. Unlike a lowlife like you, I'm busy. I'm taking time out of my busy schedule to come to this store." "Is that so? Then what are you doing at the store? You're just chatting with the manager, flirting with the male employees and male high school part-timers, and looking down on us, aren't you?" As I calmly stated this, the president's wife's face turned bright red with anger. "Just by being here, I make the store more lively, don't I? You should be more grateful." I couldn't help but laugh at her words. Do you really think that? None of us employees or customers think that way. It's interesting how there are people who have educational backgrounds but are useless in the field. I vented all the resentment I had been harboring from being looked down on. The president's wife must not have expected to be told such things. She could only come up with cliched retorts. "Do you think you can work here after talking to me like that?" So I responded without hesitation. "Then I'll quit." The president's wife laughed at me mockingly. "It'll save on our labor costs." I returned the smile. "Yes, that's right. Good for you." I then headed to the locker room. When I entered the locker room, the part-timer who had passed by the scene earlier was there, and I told her everything that had happened. "Mary, are you quitting?" She was sad because we had been working part-time together for years. Ever since the manager changed, it hasn't been fun, and it's like we're only working out of obligation, right? Many people have quit, but they don't hire more staff because it's a waste of labor costs. So our workload keeps increasing. I can't do it anymore. I guess that's true. I left the locker room and went to where the manager and president's wife were talking. Then, that's a quick story. Seeing me, the president's wife laughed. "I heard that the junior high school graduate is quitting here. I wonder if there's a place for a junior high school graduate to work." The manager also laughed, so I told them off. "Even if I have nowhere else to work, I won't come back here. I'll return the uniform next week. Thank you for everything." I felt strangely refreshed as I left the supermarket. The following week, when I went to return my uniform, the store was noisy. The manager seemed to be getting scolded by several customers. There seemed to be a commotion near the cash register. Maybe there was a mistake in the transaction. The customer's anger seemed extraordinary. However, there was nothing I could do since I had already quit, so I went to the office to leave my uniform. As I approached the office, I heard the president's wife's voice. Reluctantly, I opened the door and saw the former manager there as well. "Manager!" Even though he was now working at the headquarters and not as the manager, I accidentally called him that out of habit. The former manager seemed to have been talking to the president's wife, but she quickly left the office. What happened at the register? There seemed to be some trouble. The former store manager tells me that there have been a series of complaints at the store lately. It seems that after I quit, other part-timers and part-time students all decided to quit at once. The manager was apparently working on the sales floor, but he didn't know how to stock shelves or operate the register, so he received complaints from customers. Today's incident involved the president's wife, who was talking to a male employee on the sales floor, and a customer mistook her for an employee and asked her a question. "I don't know anything about that." The president's wife apparently brushed the customer off. The manager then appeared and accidentally revealed that she was the president's wife, making the situation worse and causing more complaints, while the register area became very crowded. At this time, all the part-timers had quit, so employees and the manager who don't usually work at the register had to do so. And there were many mistakes. The register was so slow that customers started getting irritated, and it seemed the manager was being scolded. The former store manager asked me why I quit, so I answered honestly. He then told me that he heard that the president's wife did not graduate from college. He didn't know the details, but had heard she was a high school graduate. So what was that educational condescension about? Could it be that the president's wife is looking down on people with the delusion that she is highly educated? That made her seem even more dangerous. 2 weeks later, the supermarket where I used to work was deserted. It was unusual for so few customers to be there at this time. Well, it's not surprising after all those complaints. As I was thinking that, I was approached from behind. It was the former store manager. After exchanging greetings, he told me about a new store opening 1 station away. "Mary, would you like to work there?" It seemed an employee the former manager had trained was being promoted to the new store manager. I could trust that person. I nodded and contacted my former part-time friends. When my part-time job at the new store was confirmed, some of my former part-time friends were there too, which made me feel relieved. The manager was understanding, and I felt like I could get along well with the other employees and new part-timers. The new store tried something different, handling local side dishes and bread, which was well received by customers. I began to see familiar faces from the previous store, and the new store had a successful start. According to the employees, the old store was very quiet, and the manager was scolded quite a bit at the head office meetings. Many people quit soon after being hired as part-timers, and there was always a shortage of staff. I found a new part-time job quickly, and since I was able to work happily like before, I thought everything was settled. However, about a month after starting work at the new store, the president's wife appeared before me. Well, she's the president's wife, so it wouldn't be strange for her to be at any store. But she seemed to have come specifically to see me. "I heard a junior high school dropout is working at our store again, so I came to check." I could only sigh. "What's wrong? I'm not doing anything bad." "Do you realize that because of you, the other store is in big trouble now?" "Why is it my fault? I didn't do anything wrong." "Rather, isn't the president's wife the one committing power harassment?" "You made all the other employees quit, didn't you?" The president's wife suddenly got angry. "It's completely unreasonable. The part-timer and the manager who used to work at the previous store noticed me and tried to help. But I stopped them. I, a middle school graduate, can't make all the employees quit. Why not ask them why they quit? Well, you can figure it out without asking. The part-timers nodded in agreement with my words. Shall I tell you if you don't understand? You look down on us because of our educational background. And the manager doesn't understand anything, only talks. No one wants to work part-time while experiencing power harassment. When I said that, the president's wife raised her voice again. Power harassment? Are you trying to frame me without any evidence? The moment the president's wife tried to grab me, the manager intervened. Can you please stop doing that to our part-timers? The manager's position would be compromised by saying such a thing to the president's wife. I was about to say I'm fine, but the manager said firmly, I am the manager of this store, and it's my job to protect the employees. I'll fulfill my role, whether you're the president's wife or not. Then applause came from the other part-timers. The president's wife finally lowered her hand that was trying to grab me. I took a deep breath, took out my smartphone, and said, I have evidence of power harassment. The president's wife glared at me. I played a video. It showed the president's wife yelling at another part-timer at the previous store for no reason. And it wasn't just one or two instances. The president's wife's face changed color. Then, the other part-timers came forward. Among them was a video of me being insulted for being a middle school graduate. At that time, we had conspired to collect evidence if anyone was experiencing power harassment from the president's wife. We didn't go so far as to file a lawsuit, but the videos were shared among part-time friends, so we had several at hand. Manager, we're going to sue her. When I said that, the other part-timers and the manager nodded. Naturally, the president's wife was furious with the manager. What's wrong with you? Do you think it's okay to say that to me? You're fired. Fired. Hearing that, I looked at the president's wife and laughed. Oh, I recorded that too, so we'll protect the manager who protected us. Hearing this, the president's wife changed her expression again and turned on her heels. It seemed she intended to escape. I called out to her back. There are more important things than education, right? Sometimes your humanity is more important when you enter society. Are you focusing on someone's education because you have a complex about it? The president's wife turned around and said, How did you know that? It seemed she had inadvertently admitted it. I laughed. The other employees laughed. And the president's wife, realizing her self-destruction, left at a speed I'd never seen before. After that, we decided to really sue the president's wife. We had videos taken by the part-timers, and the manager, who had been favored by the president's wife, admitted that he had been covering up her power harassment for his own safety, so we had solid evidence. The president's wife couldn't escape, and we were able to receive compensation. Then word spread to other stores, and many similar complaints were raised. The president's wife was sued for compensation, and the president, who found out about her behavior for the first time, was furious and told her to pay it back by working. It is a locally owned supermarket, so the president and his wife's house is also local. When I witnessed the president's wife working angrily at a nearby drugstore, I couldn't help but laugh. Since then, we have been working hard today under a trustworthy manager.
So, you divorced an elite like me and then remarried an unemployed man, huh? My ex-husband Brian's voice echoed throughout the fancy restaurant. Sitting next to him, the woman who was his affair partner back then looked at us, covering her mouth as if trying to hide her amusement. Well, I guess a divorced nurse like you can only marry an unemployed man. Is this your husband? He's quite a plain-looking guy. Perfect for you. Brian said something like that. My current husband stepped forward, shielding me. Please stop. I won't allow you to make fun of Mary any further. Oh, the unemployed husband has appeared. Hey, do you know who I am? I know very well, that's why. At that moment, my husband's words made my despicable ex-husband freeze. My name is Mary. I am 27 years old and I have been married for 2 years. I have been working as a nurse, my dream since I was a child, and my days are busy but fulfilling. Hey Mary, look at this! In the morning, Brian, my husband, called me over with a bundle of papers and a happy expression. What's going on? Wow, that's amazing! It was the company newsletter for the advertising agency where Brian worked. Ranked number 1, Sales Department's Rising Star, Brian. The headline was accompanied by a photo and interview of Brian with a proud smile. I'm in trouble, they featured me again. While saying that, Brian couldn't hide his joy. Brian was an elite, having graduated from a well-known university and working at a major advertising agency. That's amazing, Brian. I'm happy too. Well, as a mere nurse, you can't imagine this glamorous world. As I struggled for words, Brian, tightening his tie, said, I'll be late tonight due to a business dinner. I don't need dinner, see you. Okay, take care. Brian had this side to him. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance and eventually got married, but after a while, he would sometimes belittle me and my nursing job. At first, he shared household chores with me and spoke kindly, but recently, I'm the only one doing the chores and I catch glimpses of his condescending attitude. When I asked him to help with housework once, he said, I'm an elite ad salesman, you're just a nurse. Even you should know who has it harder. Serve me quietly. When we were dating, Brian was kind and everyone envied us as a couple. It would be a lie to say I didn't feel secure being with an elite. I grew up in a single-parent family and my mother had already passed away, so I wanted to have my own family as soon as possible. I need to have a proper talk with Brian. With that thought, I went to work that day. Good morning, did you sleep well? I'll take your temperature now. Good morning, thanks to you, I slept well. When I spoke to Mr. Green, a patient hospitalized due to injuries from a car accident, he replied calmly. Mr. Green is about 7 or 8 years older than me, but he seems to love playing video games and often plays them in bed. However, he always thanks me when I assist him and speaks politely when we chat, which makes me happy. It feels rewarding when patients thank you for your work. That day, I worked diligently from morning to evening until it was time to finish work. On my way home, I realized that Brian's birthday was coming up soon. Since he said he would be late today, I thought it might be a good idea to choose a gift for him before going home. I might as well dine out alone. With that in mind, I decided to take a train to the city in the opposite direction from usual. I successfully chose Brian's birthday present, had dinner, and was about to head home when I saw a familiar-looking man in a suit. Brian was walking. However, there was a slender woman with long brown hair snuggling up next to him. For some reason, I had a bad feeling. I thought he said he had a work dinner today. With my heart pounding uneasily, I followed the two from a distance. Then, the two of them left intimately, held hands, and went off into an accommodation facility. I felt like everything went dark before my eyes and sat down on the side of the road. It's not true. Brian was cheating on me. Dressing up, coming home late, always fiddling with his cell phone at home. I thought it was all for work, but it wasn't. Brian had betrayed me. I don't know how I managed to get home. I sat alone in the dark living room of my home. Hey Mary, what's the matter? Not even turning on the lights? Brian turned on the living room lights when he came home late. With my head down, I spoke to Brian. Brian, sit down there. What is it? I'm tired and I want to go to bed already. Just sit down. As I glared at Brian, who reluctantly sat down, I confronted him. Brian, you're cheating on me, aren't you? I saw you today. Brian looked surprised for a moment, but then sighed. Is that all? What do you mean, is that all? Yeah, that's right. I have another girl I'm dating. She's a receptionist at work, famous for being cute. Can't help it, can I? I'm popular. What are you saying? As I was astonished by Brian's brazenness, he continued, You should be grateful that I've been with someone like you, who has nothing going for them. Your face is nothing special, you work as a nurse, a lowly job, and you have no parents. How can you keep someone like me, Mary? What? Well, it doesn't matter. I kept you around as a housekeeper, but you're no longer needed. Pack your things and leave. Brian glanced at me, unable to speak from the shock, and went to the bedroom. I couldn't sleep all night and was left devastated, but I still had to go to work. Leaving the house before Brian, I tried to do my usual work despite the struggle. Did something happen? You look pale. Surprised, I looked at Mr. Green holding a game console, staring at my face. I'm fine. It's disgraceful for a nurse to be worried by a patient, haha. Trying to laugh it off, Mr. Green shook his head and said, "You shouldn't say you're a disgraceful nurse, even as a joke. I think I can be discharged today thanks to your help. I can't ask what happened, but you'll be okay. You're someone who deserves happiness." Holding back my tears, I bowed to Mr. Green. "You'll be okay. You deserve happiness." Mr. Green's words gave me encouragement. That day, I packed my things, left the completed divorce papers, and moved out of the house. The next day, Brian called. "I filed the divorce papers." "Understood. Now you're a divorcee with no parents and an ugly nurse. Do your best to be happy. Goodbye." Not wanting to hear Brian's laughing voice any longer, I hung up. And so, our divorce was finalized. For about a year after that, I was even more absorbed in my work than before. After moving, I requested to be transferred to a busy department, which left me no time to feel lonely, and it might have been for the best. On a day off, I went shopping nearby and ran into a familiar face in the park on my way home. "Ah, Mr. Green! Oh, it's been a while. Thanks to you, my health has improved a lot." Sitting on a park bench playing a game, I couldn't help but smile at Mr. Green. We talked for a while. When I told him about finding out about my husband's affair and being encouraged by his words to get a divorce, Mr. Green seemed surprised. "That must have been tough. You did well to get through it." "Thank you. I've been holding on to the words 'I'll be okay' like a charm." On the way home that day, Mr. Green invited me out for dinner. We exchanged contact information, and even though we went home that day, we continued to go on several dates afterward. Eventually, I accepted Mr. Green's, or rather, Sam's proposal to be in a relationship. Sam and I were able to go on dates even during weekdays. In other words, he didn't seem to have a job. Even so, he always treated me to meals, which I initially found quite mysterious. But above all, I was attracted to Sam's personality. He was always relaxed, composed, and polite to everyone, and he treated me with great care. His hobby was, of course, gaming, and although I had never played before, I started to join him. When we played together, Sam was clearly going easy on me, but I appreciated his kindness. A year after we started dating, Sam proposed to me. "I'm not beautiful, and I don't have any parents. Are you sure it's okay?" When I said that, Sam looked a bit troubled. "Mary, you're still hurt from your previous marriage, aren't you? You're a wonderful woman. Let's become a family and live happily together." Hearing those words made me so happy, I decided to remarry. This time, it'll be okay. Being with Sam made me feel so much happier than when I was with Brian. A year passed and Sam and I got married, and our relationship was still going strong. Since it's our wedding anniversary, let's go to a special French restaurant. Sam told me the name of the restaurant with a smile. It was a high-end restaurant even I was familiar with. Is it really okay to go to such an expensive place? It's a special day, of course it is. Thank you. We usually ate at home or went out for Japanese food, which we both loved, so this was a refreshing change. We dressed up to the nines and headed to the restaurant. As we joyfully enjoyed the dishes served, we were having a blissful wedding anniversary when suddenly I heard a familiar voice. "Mary? Hey, is that you, Mary?" I looked up to see the face of Brian, whom I never wanted to see again. Next to Brian was the woman he had cheated on me with, her arm linked to his. "What do you want?" "Huh, really? Huh." Brian rudely stared at Sam and me. It seemed Sam had instantly understood the relationship between Brian and me. "You're not supposed to have anything to do with me anymore. Please go away." I said that, but Brian didn't budge. Instead, he started to say something outrageous. "How can someone like you afford to be in such a high-end restaurant?" Sam responded to that. "Today is our wedding anniversary. We can dine wherever we want." "Huh, wedding anniversary, huh? So the poor couple splurged and came to a place like this, huh? That's touching." Brian was smirking. The woman who had been Brian's affair partner was also covering her mouth and looking at us as if she couldn't hide her amusement. "After divorcing elite me, you remarried a jobless man, huh?" Brian said to me, completely ignoring Sam. "Huh? What's that? Where did you hear that?" "I ran into one of your colleagues and heard it. They said you're going on dates even on weekday afternoons and that they've never seen your partner wearing a suit. Plus, they said he's a gamer boy. Is this the jobless husband? He's a fittingly dull man for you, huh?" Brian continued to mock me, who was too surprised to speak. "Well, a divorced nurse like you can only marry a jobless man, huh? You must be supporting this old man, huh? Good for you." "Hey, stop it. But, you know, a high-end restaurant like this doesn't suit a poor couple like you. You must have saved up all your pennies to come here, but read the atmosphere, you're lowering the tone." Brian still continued to say such things. Brian's abusive words echoed through the high-end restaurant, and before we knew it, we were the center of attention. He had always belittled me, even when we were married, and now he was even mocking my husband, Sam. I won't forgive him, never. I reached my breaking point. As I tried to stand up, Sam stood in front of me as if to shield me. Please stop. I won't allow you to ridicule Mary any further. Then, Brian said, trying to hold back his laughter, oh, the jobless husband has appeared. Even jobless, you'll defend your ugly wife, huh? Watch your mouth. You two are the ones who should read the atmosphere. Why don't you just leave? Then Brian, glaring at Sam, said, don't you dare stand up to an elite like me when you're just a jobless old man. I don't care if you're an elite or whatever, please just leave. Sam was unyielding. Then Brian said in an irritated tone, hey you, don't you know who I am? I'm the #1 salesman at S Advertising and I graduated from W University. Yes, and listen, S Advertising makes TV commercials for K-Foods and M Games. I'm on a completely different level from a jobless nobody like you. You have no right to speak to me. Then Sam paused for a moment and said in a low voice, I know who you are very well. Now, who do you think I am? Brian was momentarily confused. Huh? There's no way I'd know who someone like you is. Then, the woman next to Brian, who had been silent until now, let out a small scream. Wait a minute, this guy, isn't he Sam Green? Huh? Who's Sam Green? The woman hurriedly explained to the puzzled Brian. He's the founder of M Games. He graduated from the American Massachusetts Institute of Technology and became a top figure in the gaming industry within 10 years, a genius engineer and entrepreneur. What? Huh? Brian's face turned from red to blue. Indeed, I am Sam Green, the founder of M Games. I'm now the chairman, having stepped back from day-to-day management, Sam said with a straight face. Yes, Sam was the person who founded the super famous game company M Games. I remember being convinced about his free time on weekdays and his constant gaming when I heard that. Wait a minute. M Games is one of our major clients. Brian, now pale, said this while trembling. His face was covered in cold sweat. That's right, we handle all your TV commercials and magazine ads. The advertising budget must be in the billions, Sam said with a smile. At that moment, Brian and the woman next to him bowed their heads. We're so sorry, please forgive us. We had no idea you were the chairman of M Games, Sam said to flustered Brian, trying to apologize. You're apologizing to the wrong person, aren't you? You should be apologizing to Mary. Brian then turned to me and prostrated himself. The woman next to him looked at Brian in astonishment. Mary, no, Miss Mary, I'm sorry for what happened when we were married and for today. Please forgive me. I almost laughed at Brian's pathetic state but managed to hold it in. Mary, what will you do? Sam asked me in a relaxed tone. No, it's impossible to forgive him normally. Please don't ever show up in front of us again, I said firmly. Sam grinned and gave me a small thumbs up. He then bent down and whispered in Brian's ear. Mary is a perfect wife for me. I'll make her happy from now on, so you should worry about your own neck. The pale and trembling Brian and the woman left with their tails between their legs. Let's continue our meal. I smiled at Sam, who spoke in his usual gentle tone, and we enjoyed the rest of our meal. Half a year later, Sam instructed M Games to stop dealing with S Advertising Agency. He reported the horrible attitude Brian had shown, and Brian was fired to take responsibility. His proud, elite career was probably over now. To make matters worse, the woman who was about to remarry Brian seemed to have given up on him and left him. He is now alone, living in poverty in a shabby apartment, but that's none of our business. As for us, we recently found out I was pregnant. Sam was so happy that he jumped up and down and recently returned to game development after a long absence. He wants to make games that can be played with children. As I watched Sam, I hoped that this peace would last forever.